Go for a coffee. I guess my story is going to steal your attention. First of all, I want to tell you that I am fascinated by your YouTube channel. I am writing to share an experience I had a little over a year ago. Despite the fact that the paranormal always it has caught my attention, I had not had an experience strange enough, or that would have made me feel that anxiety in a few words. I am a bit skeptical. On that occasion it was more or less 8 at night. I was hungry, but not yet. There was nothing prepared. My mom had practically just defrosted the meat for dinner, but the truth was I wasn't going to hold out until then. I went down to the store to buy one of those individual pizzas for the microwave or pan. The lights in my building, they were off. It didn't scare me. But I always had a lamp downstairs in those cases because apparently after more than 10 years of living there, I can't memorize the steps and I've already slipped a couple of times. When I got outside the corridor from the building that connects to the parking lot, it was dark. One or another window lit up, but the trees on the sides of the hall did not let in enough light. The store is in an apartment and the window is the entrance there. We rang the bell so that the lady us pay attention. It's not very far from the building. It could have taken a maximum of 10 minutes. But when I was walking down that corridor, that calm atmosphere had evaporated. I opened the door of the building and the lights remained off. On the first floor something strange began to happen. The buildings there have 4 floors and I live up to the top floor. I began to feel very bad, wanting to flee, and yet I kept going, or else if it was my only option. But the worst came when I was at the second half-break floor, and there I saw the ankles of what could be an old woman. You know, they were chubby and she had black moccasins. The woman was standing next to one of the apartments as if she were waiting for someone. The unusual thing, what scared me first, was that I wanted to look up and see his face, but in an inexplicable way I couldn't. I really couldn't. I don't know if it was fear. I don't know, it was as if something or someone made it impossible for my neck to move. My whole body rather, while I was motionless. I tried to distinguish this woman, and I remember a black dress with 3/4 sleeves. The length reached below the knee, but she had a couple of books on her right arm and a black rosary tangled in her hand. I made myself look. I finally moved aside as I could to let her pass. She was moving with difficulty. I too, my body prevented me from moving, perhaps because of the fear I felt, but I went up to the middle of the next flight of stairs. I had my flashlight, so I offered her the lady to accompany her with the light to the ground floor. She did not answer me. She continued down without making any noise. I remained still and very quiet. It just so happened that the doors of the condominium buildings where I live are heavy metal and not at all silent. No, it doesn't matter how careful you are with the lock, because you always hear a little click. I stayed there waiting to hear it for several minutes, but nothing. Not even the footsteps of the woman approaching the door. Not even the wind coming in. Total silence. As I leaned against the railing looking down, I prayed what little I know to feel safe somehow. But as far-fetched as it sounds, I couldn't do it fluently. My legs seemed to be interrupted, as if my mind was sabotaging me. And then I realized that at no time did I see the feet of the old woman go down. Not after my first meeting with her did I react to what had just happened, and my heart began to beat very quickly. I felt as if the blood was running out of me, out of the body, and I ran as fast as I could to enter my house. I sat down to catch my breath and try to assimilate everything. After a while it occurred to me that I could be a friend of my neighbor who was a little rude, very shy, or another neighbor or a relative, but nothing seemed to fully convince me, nothing that will provide me with a rational explanation. Finally I thought of my maternal grandmother who died a few years ago, but if that was the case, because I felt in danger, because I was so afraid of that presence, or simply because I couldn't see her face, and she didn't answer me. She didn't talk to me to let me know it was her. I'll never get out of the doubt, but fortunately I didn't meet that woman or entity or whatever it was again. I have another story that had happened to me. This story happened a few days ago. To tell you something, a dream, or rather a nightmare that came true. One night, like any other, around 10 o'clock I went to sleep. Everything was very normal. When I managed to fall asleep, in my interior I began to see myself as on a sidewalk. With my partner, everything was very lonely, very dark, and apparently we were just trying to find a nearby store. In my dream, it must have been around 11 at night when we finally found a small store, which was only illuminated by a tiny candle from the darkness. A very scary lady comes out to attend to us. She acted very strangely when we asked her to rent us the phone so we could call, and she only answered us with great fear in her eyes and in her voice that told us we were going, that she would bring us something. Without being able to ask what she meant, the lady began to close everything and got in, and everything was completely dark. I kept asking myself what she meant. My boyfriend went to his motorcycle and told me, "Come on," with a very broken and trembling voice. I began to feel a horrible chill in my dream, and when I was going towards him to climb up, I saw how from the hill where all the houses were located came a silhouette like an old woman. I couldn't see his feet. It didn't seem like he was running, but rather flying at a low altitude and heading towards us at a supernatural speed. I was filled with panic. I got on the motorcycle as quickly as possible, and my boyfriend started quickly, when take courage, turned back to see if the strange silhouette of the old woman was still behind us, and to my surprise the old woman has remained still, right after she began to make a noise like a horrible scream, to frighten you. At that moment I woke up in a jump. I had woken up from that horrible, terrifying dream, but the most surprising thing is that what had woken me up were those horrible screams. That is, at 3 in the morning, already awake, I kept hearing them clearly outside my house. When I went to where my mother was, I found her praying. I asked her if she was listening to that, and she answered me, "An hour ago, there is a lady hiding in the patio, in front of the house." I swear my panic pressure rose. I felt at that moment it was like the same nightmare I had. Those horrible moans would have been what woke me up and not the nightmare. And now the fact that there was someone in front of my house, immediately my mom and I started praying together for a while. For a long time. The truth is we were not able to look out the window to see if the lady was still there. The next morning we got up as we usually did every morning. My mother and I looked at each other without knowing what to say to each other. They knocked the door of the house. When my mother opened, we saw that it was the neighbor next door where we lived. Wondering if we had heard that at night, we just looked at each other and went out to the garden with our neighbor. Almost all the neighbors from our block were outside from their houses, speaking of the strange and frightening moans of the night before. I don't know why I went. I, the one who dreamed of this old woman and of that lament. The truth had always been very skeptical, but since then, I have followed dreaming about her. Today I decided to write to them and tell them the story, because this time, precisely tonight, I dreamed about her again. This time I was at my boyfriend's house. After spending a long weekend together and having already arrived very tired, we fell asleep, and that's when I began to dream that I was on the block where I lived, and in the distance I could see a boy calling me, gesturing for me to come closer. I went to where I was, and when I got closer I could see and recognize that it was an ex-boyfriend from when I was about 16 years old. But even in my mind I was wondering what he was doing there, and it is that he died just last December. Even so, I approached him. He just smiled at me and he asked me normal things, as if he wanted to establish a conversation. But something unusual in him was a big smile, and since he had his perturbed look on his face when he spoke to me, I was still shocked and wondering how is it possible. If he is still dead, I took my time and I answered him and talked. I tried to talk to him, but still with a lot of amazement to have him there in the dream in front of me. It would not be the same energy that he transmitted to me with his smile and his gaze. It filled me with pleasure to see him. We were dating for a short time and then we decided to be friends. He left for Spain and each one made his life. Years later I found out that he was in a coma due to a health problem he had, and days later he passed away. It was news that moved me a lot because he was a good boyfriend, a good friend. When I had all that on my mind, I don't know why I was born to ask him, "Are you okay? What are you doing here? How are you here?" He just gave a big smile so contagious that it made me smile. I gave him back. And he told me I'm very well. I was very happy. In the dream I took a photo to capture that moment, to have it as a memory, without really being aware that it was all a dream. When I saw the photo, when I searched for it on my cell phone to see it again, I saw that horrible and diabolical old woman behind him. I woke up confused again at 3 in the morning. And with a chill horrible as I told you, to this day I keep dreaming of that woman. I hope you are very well, friends. And well, a kiss and a very strong hug until you hear my story. I really appreciate you having the confidence to allow me to share this story. And this last story happened to my boyfriend.
I recently started listening to your videos and I find them very interesting. My girlfriend sent me a video and it immediately gave me a chill. I live on a street where people constantly mention that a girl appears, and the video of the ghost girl seemed familiar to me. The street of the building where I live. A few months ago I went out at dawn to buy cigarettes because I was working and I didn't want to fall asleep. When I returned there was an old man with a pair of German Shepherd. At first it seemed that he had gone out for a walk dog, and I was waiting for him to do his thing. When I got a little closer I realized that the old man was standing while the dog was pulling himself forward. However, a dog of that size would not have a hard time making the owner moved forward. The old man was looking at the opposite sidewalk, without making any effort to move. Apparently he had a lot of strength because his arm didn't even move. He kept walking and I began to hear the old man's voice and his laugh. It was as if he were talking with someone who was in front of him on the other side of the sidewalk. He turned to see if there was another person on the opposite sidewalk or a light on from a building on the other side, or at least if he had his cell phone with hands-free headphones, but nothing. It seemed that the old man was talking to someone that only he could see. I started to feel nervous about the whole situation, but I kept walking. And I passed right behind the old man. At that moment I felt a chill and my heart almost jumped out of my chest. Because right behind him the dog sat next to his master and the man laughed. I walked faster to enter my building. I dropped my keys and when I picked them up they began to move towards me, and the dog was panting. I quickly opened the door and the hall sensor turned on the light. I stepped to the side to get out of sight of the old man and his dog, staying behind the garage door and waiting for them to pass so I could go up to my apartment. I was shaking and I couldn't move. The dog's panting got louder and I couldn't think of anything else but to start praying. I saw the shadow of the old man and the dog under my feet. The dog was sniffing right under the door where I was, and the old man laughed. The words forgot me and I could not continue with my prayer. I wanted them to leave so I could go up to my apartment. My hands began to sweat and I tried with all my might to continue praying. When at last I made it, the dog stopped panting and there was no longer any shadow under my feet. Instinctively I went out and almost immediately they had left, but no one was on the street. In fact, there was nothing. There was no one on the street. How fast could the dog have gone? Old man, to turn or get out of sight. I ran back to my apartment with the feeling of being watched. That night I could not sleep. I have never seen the old man or the dog again. I wish they could read this. I could not to explain what happened. I just know that it's been a long time since I felt this scared.